What if one single statement from Donald Trump just detonated the entire immigration debate across the West and left Britain's prime minister with nowhere to hide? Tonight, Trump backs mass deportations, the political ground shifts overnight, and Keir Starmer suddenly finds himself cornered in a fight he never planned to face. For months, Trump's rhetoric on immigration had been building. First, it was hints, then campaign-style promises. Now, it's explicit, unapologetic support for mass deportations on a scale not seen in modern Western democracies. Trump isn't just talking about tightening borders or speeding up asylum processing. He's talking about removing millions, restoring what he calls law and order, and sending a clear signal that the era of leniency is over. Supporters are cheering. Critics are warning of chaos. But one thing is undeniable. This announcement changes the political calculus everywhere, including in the United Kingdom. Because Trump's message doesn't exist in a vacuum. Across Europe and Britain, immigration has become the defining issue of the decade. Rising costs of living, housing shortages, overstretched public services, and social tensions have all been tied, fairly or not, to migration levels. Voters are angry, frustrated, and increasingly skeptical of establishment promises. And now Trump has given those voters a symbol, a blueprint, and a rallying cry. In Britain, Keir Starmer is facing a perfect storm. On one side, he has international allies, legal frameworks, and human rights commitments that demand caution, moderation, and diplomacy. On the other side, he has an electorate that is growing impatient and opposition forces ready to weaponize every perceived weakness. Trump's endorsement of mass deportations doesn't just embolden American conservatives, it energizes British critics who argue that tough action is not only possible, but politically rewarding. The problem for Starmer is timing. Just as he's trying to project competence, stability, and seriousness on the world stage, Trump's intervention reframes the debate. Suddenly, incremental reforms and careful language look timid. Promises to manage migration responsibly sound hollow when contrasted with Trump's blunt, forceful approach. Even voters who dislike Trump personally are paying attention to one uncomfortable fact. He speaks in absolutes, and absolutes cut through the noise. Inside Westminster, the reaction has been tense. Some labor figures privately worry that Trump's stance will drag the entire political conversation to the right. Others fear that refusing to engage with the argument will make Starmer look disconnected from public anger. Conservatives, meanwhile, see opportunity. They argue that if Trump can promise mass deportations and survive politically, why shouldn't Britain take similarly radical steps? Reformist voices are already using Trump's language almost word for word, demanding decisive action and accusing the government of weakness. Starmer's dilemma is brutal. If he distances himself too strongly from Trump, he risks being portrayed as out of touch with voters who are demanding tougher controls. If he moves closer to that rhetoric, he risks alienating his base, triggering legal challenges, and inviting international criticism. There is no safe middle ground anymore because Trump has blown it apart. And then there's the international angle. Trump's support for mass deportations signals a broader shift in how a future U.S. administration might approach alliances, borders, and global migration. If America hardens its stance, pressure on countries like the UK will intensify. Migratory routes shift, diplomatic expectations change. Deals that once relied on shared humanitarian frameworks may no longer exist. Starmer isn't just responding to domestic pressure, he's staring down a potential transformation of the global order. Critics of Trump warn that mass deportations on this scale could trigger economic disruption, labor shortages, and humanitarian crises. They argue that migrants are deeply woven into the fabric of modern economies, from agriculture to healthcare. Removing them en masse, they say, would cause inflation, reduce growth, and strain communities. But Trump's supporters counter with a simple message: sovereignty first, borders first, citizens first. And that message resonates far beyond U.S. borders. In Britain, the public mood is conflicted. Polls consistently show concern about immigration levels, but also discomfort with extreme measures. Many voters want control, not cruelty, order, not chaos. Starmer has tried to position himself as the adult in the room, promising firm but fair policies. Yet Trump's declaration forces a comparison that Starmer never wanted. Fairness doesn't trend on social media, firmness does. The media reaction has only intensified the pressure. Headlines frame Trump as decisive and Starmer as hesitant. Pundits ask whether Britain is falling behind a global shift toward hardline policies. Talk shows debate whether mass deportations are inevitable in an age of populism. Each cycle reinforces the idea that something fundamental is changing, and that leaders who don't adapt risk being swept aside. What makes this moment especially dangerous for Starmer is the emotional power of Trump's messaging. It's not technical. It's visceral. It taps into fear, frustration, and a sense of lost control. Starmer's language, by contrast, is careful, legalistic, and measured. That may reassure institutions, but it doesn't electrify crowds. And in a political climate driven by outrage and viral moments, that gap matters. Behind the scenes, advisors are scrambling. Do they toughen the language, accelerate removals, push new legislation, or do they hold the line and hope voters reward restraint? Every option carries risk. Trump has set a benchmark that is intentionally difficult to match without crossing ethical and legal red lines. That may be the point. By raising the stakes, he forces other leaders into uncomfortable positions. There's also a deeper question lurking beneath the headlines. Is this the beginning of a new era where mass deportations become normalized in Western democracies? Or is Trump an outlier whose influence will fade? Starmer's response may help determine the answer, at least in Britain. If he resists and survives politically, it could signal that voters still value balance. If he falters, others will learn the lesson quickly. Supporters of Trump argue that leaders like Starmer have had years to fix the problem and failed. They see Trump's approach as overdue reality. Critics argue that mass deportations are a blunt instrument that ignores complexity and human cost. But in politics, perception often outweighs nuance. And right now, the perception is that Trump is setting the agenda. This is why this moment matters so much. It's not just about Trump or Starmer. It's about the direction of Democratic politics. In an age of anxiety, it's about whether anger continues to dominate policy or whether pragmatism can still win. Trump's announcement has poured fuel on a fire that was already burning, and leaders across the world are feeling the heat. For Starmer, the clock is ticking. Silence looks like weakness. Overreaction looks like panic. Every statement will be dissected, every policy compared to Trump's vision. Allies will urge caution. Opponents will demand action. Voters will watch closely to see whether he leads or follows. One thing is certain, the ground has shifted. Trump's support for mass deportations has redefined what tough looks like in modern politics. It has cornered Starmer into a debate he cannot avoid and cannot easily win. Whether this moment becomes a turning point or a warning sign will depend on what happens next. But tonight, as the dust settles, one reality stands out above all others. The rules have changed, the conversation has changed, and for leaders like Keir Starmer, navigating this new landscape may be the biggest test of their political lives.